Hey everyone, welcome to this session on React State and Event Handling. In this video, we will break down these key concepts step by step so that you can build dynamic and interactive React application with ease. Let's dive in. So first of all, understanding states in React. State is a built-in object in React that store data specific to a component. When the state changes, React automatically updates the UI to reflect the new data. Think of it like a memory that keeps track of dynamic values. Here is the using state in a function component. In function component, we use the use state hook to manage states. Let's take an example, a simple counter example here. You can see here we use a counter with normal state condition. Here we use a function counter, and you can see here is a use a state hook. Its a count is the state variable. Set count is the function to update it. Now here we use a count, and here we use a set count equals to use state 0. So when I click on the h1 button, now you can see we have a two button, one for increment and one for decrement. When I click on increment button, it's increase the value and it's changed its state like 1 2 3 and 4. Now we copy this code and paste it in our code editor. Now you can see here we have a import react use state, and here we use a react. Now we fix this. Now you can see here we have function counter, and we save this code. Now you can see here we have a counter. When I click on increase button, it's increase 1 2 3 4, and when I click on decrease, I can see it's change its state. Now the second is using state in a class component. Here's the before react hook class components use this dot state and this dot set state. Here the same counter example using a class component, and now you can see here we use a class counter. So we create a class counter. Here we use a component here. You can see here is a component, and here we use a class. Here we use a counter, and here we use a extend, and here we use a component. Now we create a constructor here. Inside the constructor we use a super keyword, and here we use this dot state, and here we use a set count 0. Now here we use a increase count equals to, we use arrow function here. Here we use this dot set state. Here we count this dot state dot count. Here we use a plus 1. Here we use a decrease function for decrement. Copy this code. You can see here this dot set state, and here we use a minus 1. Now after that we render the return function. Now you can see here we use a render. Here we use a return, and inside the return we use a, like we use a div. Inside the div we use h1. Inside the h1 we use count. Here we use parameter like this dot state dot count. Now here we use a button. In the button we use a increase. You can see here we use a increase text here. This button is for increase, so we use a on click. Inside the on click we use this dot increase count. We copy this code and paste it here. Now here we use a decrease. Now here we use a decrease. Now you can see here we can increase, we can decrease, we can increase 1 2 3 4, and we can decrease. Next is handling event in React. So event handling in React is similar to JavaScript but follow specific syntax rules. So let's look at handling click events. Here we use a functions component event handling. Now you can see here we use a import React. Now we copy this code and we paste it here. Now we save this. I can see here we have a functions. So here we have a functions like click button, and here we use a handle click. Now here we use a button click when a return button on click, we use a hand click. Now when it's a click me, and then the alert box button click it's shown. Now we save this. What we have here, you saw this click me button. When I click on that, I can see it's give me an alert box like button click. And then the next is handling click with arrow function. So here you can see is a functions button, and here we use is a smaller code. Now we copy this code here, and now we paste it here, and we save this. Now when I click on this button, it's working same. Then the next is handling click event in a class component. In a class components events, handlers are defined as method, and they require proper binding when using this. I can see here we use a class component here, click button extend components. Here we use a handle click, we use alert box. Now here we use a render, and then we use button on click. Here we have a button. Now we copy this code and paste it here. Now we save this, and I can see here is the button. When I click on that, I can say class button click. So using an arrow function to avoid binding, so we use this method in a class. Now you can see we copy this code and paste it here. Now we save this. Now you can see here is a click me button. When I click on it, it's give me an alert. Now here we use arrow functions. So arrow function automatically bind these, making the code cleaner. Next is a passing parameter to event handler. So here sometimes we need to pass parameters to event handler. Here is the examples like passing a name to event handler. In React you can pass parameters to an event handler using an arrow function inside on click. Now you can see here we use a function greeting props. Here we use a handle clip name, and here we give a hello, and here we use a parameter. We use a props here. Now here we give a button on click and a click props dot name. Now we copy this and save this. Now you can see what we have here. Here we have a greet button. When I click on this, now you can see here is a hello undefined. Why undefined? Because we didn't pass the name here. Now we open our apps.js file. Now here we give a name like name equals to like I'm giving name here Amir. Now we save this. I can see when I click on grid, now it's give me a hello Amir. Now here is the binding events in a class component. In a class components, event handlers don't automatically bind these, so we must bind them explicitly. Here are 3 methods. So first we use using the constructor. Now you can see here we copy this code and paste it here, save this. Now you can see here is the button. When I click on, now you can see button click. Let's see the second method. You can see here is using an arrow function in render. Now we copy this code and paste it here. Now here we use import components React. Now here we use a class click button extended components. Here we use a handle click, and here we use a alert box, and here we use a arrow function this dot handle click. Now we save this. Now when I click on, now you can see button click. Now the third is using a class property with an arrow function. We copy this code, we paste it here. Now we save this. Now you can see when I click on that, now you can see it's working properly. So the class property method is recommended because it avoids unnecessary re-rendering. Now here is the state versus props key differences. I can see here we have a feature, state and props. So first feature is mutability. In a state it's change, it can be changed, and in the props it's read only. And the feature of scope, in a state it's local to the component, and in the prop it's passed from the parent to child. And the last one is usage, feature usage. In a state it's used for dynamic changes, and in a props it's used for data flow. Now you can see here is a conditional rendering with state. You can conditionally render UI elements in React based on state using different techniques. So first is a show hide text using use state technique. We use here a function component. Now we copy this code, we paste it here. Now you can see here we have a function toggle. Now here we use a constant is visible and set is visible equals to use state true. Now you can see is visible, we use a and method here. Now you can see hello I am available, and a button on click set visible and is visible not is visible. So then it's give me a hello is visible hide and show. Now we save this code. You can see here we have a text hello I am visible. When I click on hide, now you can see it's hide, and its buttons turns to show. Now when we click on show button, it's give me a hide toggle. It's a toggling, and clicking the toggle visibility dynamically. So friends, that's all for today's session on React state and event handling. I hope these explanations help you build more interactive React application. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. Keep smiling and happy coding. Thank you.